Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, as you know, Just Thoughts Ministry has never asked for money of any kind, nor do we accept tithes or gift offerings. However, I do try my best to use my God-given talents to write good stories. With that in mind, I am proud to announce the release of my new novel called The Iconic Time Box, due out in June of 2018. The Iconic Time Box is the story of a young and restless 24-year-old living in a small, bland, boring piece of suburbia. He soon finds himself at odds with his family, with his friends, and with the love of his life because he is trapped between their expectations of him and his pursuit of his one dream, time travel. Will he succeed in his quest to breach the walls of time? Well, only time will tell. Where would you go to travel in time? What great figures of history would you want to meet? This is a science fiction story with a positive biblical take added in and some riveting surprises. Kevin Anderson and Associates Book Publishing of Manhattan, New York says, "This book has an immediate readability. The characters are well developed, the story moves along at a great pace, and it's sure to keep readers anxious to turn to the next page." Sacred Fire Media says, "This book is outstanding and will no doubt become an instant classic in the world of sci-fi. If you love to read, this book does not disappoint." The Iconic Time Box is available at Amazon.com and Legacy Book Publishing, and very soon at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million in June of 2018. Thank you, and God bless you.
Trials and troubles and too much sin, tests will occur. Running a race we will never win without the word.
Good morning, good day, good evening, or whenever you're listening to this. Welcome to Just Thoughts. Today I'm going to be doing a commentary, and yes, it will extend into a rant. There is plenty to rant about. I won't get to it all. And I think I'll just entitle this one Monument to Insanity. It's an old saying my mother used to say a lot. When something was stupid, she called it a monument to dumbness. But that's what we're going to be talking about here, is a monument to insanity, the legacy of insanity. Over this past Memorial Day weekend, I've watched a number of movies, old war movies, and I've watched a number of documentaries about World War II as told by the people who lived it. Now, I have made it my business over the years to stop and talk to veterans wherever I meet them, from whatever era. I have talked to many men over my lifetime that lived during World War II and participated in World War II, as well as those who participated in Korea, Vietnam, and in latter years, a few of the more recent wars we have engaged in, Iraq, Afghanistan, and such. But one thing stands out to me with regards to the vets of the World War II Korean era who lived in absolute hell in their younger lives, not knowing if they were going to come home alive or be killed. None of them can believe what this nation that they went out and fought and shed blood for has become. None of them can believe that they watched their friends die on the beaches at Normandy or at Pearl Harbor or many of the other places that the war took place, that they all seemingly died in vain. Not so much in their time. When they came home, they were hailed as heroes. But now, some of them that are still alive, and they are getting fewer and fewer in number, have told me that they are sickened by what this nation has become, by the spoiled little whiny brats that this nation has turned out. I was born 21 years after World War II ended. And to me, growing up, it seemed like it as though it had been a lot longer time between the end of the war and my birth. But now at the age of 51, I realized that that was not so long at all. It's amazing how fast these little flesh lives pass us by and reveal to us all the mistakes that we made and show us, usually later, how really blessed we have been. I have spoken to men who were there on the day of infamy. They were at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. They saw the events with their own eyes. That's when the war began for the United States in earnest. And it still breaks their hearts and brings them to tears to remember those men that are still entombed aboard the Arizona. The men that died on the other ships that fell prey to the Japanese on that day. I have spoken to other men who flew off of carriers, part of Jimmy Doolittle's raiders, who flew over Tokyo and had to crash land in the sea or land in China because it was a one-way trip. And they did it for duty and honor, for country and freedom. That's something today that the little spoiled bastards that we live with would have no concept of. I have talked to people who fought in the Euro theater of operations, as well as in the South Pacific. Indeed, my great-uncle, Eldridge Pryor Sims, was a decorated veteran of Midway, Bataan, and the Solomon Islands. And he told me, as I was a younger man in life, what he found very hard to talk about. He told me what it had been like to witness his friends being killed around him. He was a hero himself. He was a very strong Christian, and by the time I encountered him, he was a much older man. After all, he was my great-uncle. But he left a very indelible impression on me as to the things that he had seen in his lifetime. My mother always said that he was never the same after he came back, and I believe it. Though in his later life you would have never known it. He hid it very well. But this current generation that gets out and whines about gun control and preaches socialism know nothing of those times. They have been disconnected from our heritage by those who want the heroes of those times forgotten. They seldom stop to think of those men who fought in World War II. And what it was like for them. You know, we all tend to think of the elder generation as always being older than us. But everybody had a birth. Everybody had a childhood. Everybody had teenage years. Everybody had early 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. Old age and then passed on. The soldiers of those times were no different. They were anywhere from 18 to 40-something years old. And they were in combat. Of course, there were people older than that, officers and such, involved in the war, generals. But those men that got out and fought in those wars were not spoiled like the little safe space brats of today, who again whine about gun control and march to the beat of the drums of socialism, because they're told that it's the cool and rebellious thing to do. No, those men that fought in the great world wars, World War I, World War II, even you could say any American war, from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War to the Spanish-American War, the Alamo, any war that Americans have been involved with, those men have been patriots who fought and died for something that they believed in. And what they fought and died for was freedom at any cost. And they were not just old men, they were young, terrified teens. They were 20-something, 30-something, 40-something. They had the same feelings of fear and of death as you or I. They were the finest generations this nation has produced. And yet their stories and our history are of no interest of the youth of today. The youth of today. The modern youth are self-consumed. All I can say for the veterans is God bless them. God bless all who served the great United States, all who laid down their lives for the freedoms of this great nation, all who shed blood for this nation, to preserve our freedoms and our way of life. A way of life that, quite frankly, modern-day scumbags and social justice warrior morons and self-centered elected officials would have no concept of what it's like to live for liberty and to fight for liberty. And they would have us forget. They do their best to ignore or rewrite history and change the truth. Very much like their master, Satan. Satan, of course, rebelled against God and has done everything that he could in this earth age to cause people to forget the name of God. But some of us are not going to forget the name of God, no matter what they pull. We're not going to bow a knee to Baal. We're not going to bow a knee to the false Christ. Every day, and every minute of the day, we are subjected to lies, misinformation, propaganda, and disinformation. The whole world is now poised to live a bunch of lies. And they will happily live a bunch of lies. One of the biggest lies that people attempt to push is that Christians are an ever-shrinking number. Well, that's not really true. Christians are the majority of this nation. Christians are a majority in the European nations. Despite the number of Muslims, despite the number of other beliefs, whether they be New Age or atheist or whatever. Christians are the majority in this nation. But one would never know it by how Christians allow themselves to be ruled and governed by the ungodly. By social justice, which itself is another oxymoron, if there ever was one. Like unto Christian socialists. Those words are incompatible to go in one phrase or sentence together. There is no such thing as a Christian socialist. If you are a socialist, you are against Christianity. You cannot serve two masters. Socialism is the father of communism. And communism allows no beliefs and removes freedoms. And we can see it manifest in what has happened in our country over the last, let's say, 100 years. All I can say is, oh merciful God in heaven, forgive us for allowing ourselves to be subject to their insanity. In an overabundance of tolerance and caution, we have allowed them to get a hold on us. We have allowed them to change our laws, to elect into office their own kind, which is to say their own fleshly, atheistic, ungodly, New Age, moronic kind. And we have said nothing as they continue to take ground from us, Christians, and pass laws that burden us and make it easy for the lazy slacker, and put up on a pedestal the perverse, the America hater, and those who perpetually view themselves as victims because of their race and because of events in history. Social justice is not justice. Social justice is that which dictates that the punishment must never fit the crime, and that preferential treatment must be applied due to considerations of race, or sexuality, or national origin, or even of other religions. That is to say, other than Christianity. And if they don't get their way, social justice warriors throw tantrums. They lay across highways. They lay down in stores and moan and whine and chant. But when questioned one-on-one using common sense, they're like a deer in the headlights because they have no argument. They are morons. They are coached morons. All they ever do is talk about how unfair life is, and how the evil white man has done so many things to everyone else in the world. The truth is that there is no race that is perfect, and all races have done the same things. By that, what do I mean? I mean that African Americans, and let's do away with that word right away. There is no such thing as an African American. You are either an American citizen or you're not an American. You know, I don't identify myself as a Scotch-Irish American. Why? Because I'm an American. And I know people who don't call themselves Italian American. I know people who don't call themselves Spanish or Latino American or Asian American. They're simply Americans. God has told us not to take note of any preferential rules. In other words, not to be a respecter of persons or a man-pleaser. Those ideals are the rantings of the insane or true hate-mongers who are biased in their judgment and have an agenda. There are precedents set in place by panderers and placaters who hate their own country, in most cases their own race. To social justice, the victim is of no consequence. The victim's pain is not considered before the criminals. The criminal who caused the pain in the first place. But if the victim is a perceived minority, well, there's a big difference. Whatever way justice can be brought to the least effect is applied by social justice. Therefore, justice, equity, equality cannot and will not be satisfied. Truly, Deuteronomy chapter 28, which is an oracle of God, that is to say, an utterance of God, the Word of God, has come to pass. We have become the tail, and they are now the head. We do not put them to flight, they put us to flight. People are scared to speak out against them for the horrible, unthinkable thing of labeling them as a bigot. You see, this is what they call using words as a weapon. If you disagree with someone, call them a racist. Doesn't mean they are a racist. Just means you can call them one and somehow justify your own argument in your own conceit. It doesn't make it true. But this is what has happened. Deuteronomy 28 has come to pass, is coming to pass. Whereas when God was revered among us, the godless and the perverse and the anti-justice bleeding heart moron stayed silent and stayed in the dark and hid from the light where they belonged like roaches. But now they have come out into the light, and they are prideful. They are boasters. Their hearts conceive wicked things. They lie to us. They spin the truth to fit their molds. And they have blood on their hands. And they would be baptized in that blood if they could. They protect the criminal and his crooked paths. They kill the innocent unborn and do it under the guise of choice, liberty, justice, freedom, and the American way. And such things can be spoken along the line of the fleshly path, which has pushed God away. In other words, there's two facets to freedom. There is freedom the way it should be, and there is freedom that goes beyond what we should be allowed, so that people become drunken on it. So that people have the right to stick their finger in God's face and say, you do not exist. And to practice the perverse things that God has said he shall not tolerate. People will probably answer that and say, well, he sure is tolerating it now. Yeah, he sure is, because he's long-suffering. But one day there's going to be a reckoning and a trial by fire. Speaking of that, I'm asked over and over again, how does God tolerate this? How long shall it be before he comes with his vengeance? Well, the answer to that is that when God sees fit to end all of this, it will end. Not 1 second before, not 1 second after. And then shall the prideful fall, and they shall wail and scream and lay down in shame, afraid to look upon the brilliance of his presence. But for now, in this earth age that Satan rules over, the prince of the air, the prince of the world, they bear rule. And whether we speak figuratively or literally, they promised the same as their father did. In other words, what did Satan promise Eve to give to Adam? He said unto her, ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Knowing meaning you're going to have great knowledge, in so much that you will be able to know the difference between good or evil. But you'll want to do the evil, because there will be no limits set upon you and no rules. See, that's what the whole course of rebellion is, and that's what Satan preaches. He wants people to worship him and not be limited by the rules and the laws of God. And of course, his children, in like manner, follow his wake. I hear the generation directly behind mine, now coming of age, speaking the same things that my generation spoke when we were where they now are. Many of them are just waking up to the truth.
that they are not immortal, that age is catching up to them. But some have gained enough wisdom to see what is happening in this nation and in the world. Yet few dare to speak up and speak out and say that anything is wrong, because again, someone might label them as a hateful, racist bigot. As much as God shows us in His Word, as much as mankind reveals his hypocrisy every day, as many as are able to see the truth and know what social justice and what the Democratic Party of this nation are pushing, that is to say, communism, wrapped in a kindler, gentler looking socialist suit, it matters not. Because there are insane amounts of people, that is to say, who cannot see it or refuse to see it. They're biased. They don't want to find the truth. They don't want to hear the truth. They want smooth words. They want to be told, go ahead and live your little perverse lifestyles. God is okay with it. Go ahead and do whatever you want. No rules. Sadly, there are a few who, even though they do these things, can see a little modicum of the truth, but they refuse to admit it because they're politically motivated to stand with the left, and they do. And we keep moving ever closer towards the goal of dumbing down the people, particularly our children, our youth, our young adults, and we allow those who teach them to make blatant strides and to forward racism, to push racism, that is to say, reverse discrimination against Caucasians, so that people fear to speak up. We allow them to make overtures to taking our rights from us and taking our rights from us. In other words, when we hear the overtures coming, people don't say anything, and then the next thing you know, another right bites the dust. In many cases, they're taking our rights away and regulating us while biasedly forwarding any cause which placates to the other races of the world. And it doesn't matter if this placation, this pandering, is actually holding those races back and keeping them enslaved so that they do not move up the ladder nor better themselves, but just have enough to feed themselves and survive and sit on their asses and do nothing. We have allowed these people, these racist, bigoted people, to tell us and define for us what racism is, according to their slanted point of view. We have allowed biased bigots to tell us what is fair between the races. And usually, in social justice, it all centers around what the Caucasian has done wrong for the last 500 years. And what every other race has done wrong for the last 500 years is tolerated. What am I speaking of particularly when I say that? Well, we have a nice, pretty picture painted for us in this world of what Africa and the black people were like, and what America and the Native American, that is to say the American Indian, were like. And they're like something out of a movie. You know, they were just peaceful people wanting to get along and wanting to harm no one, when nothing is farther from the truth. Anyone who knows history and knows the bloody history of pre-Anglo-sized America knows that the American Indians were conquerors themselves, that they killed off entire tribes of their enemies, that is to say, people who were kin to them, but not of their particular tribe. They took their women and raped them and brought forth children to increase their numbers. They killed off the men, many times in horrible ways, and the same is true in Africa. The very same things happened in Africa. African tribes bought and sold themselves into slavery. And I don't mean slavery to the white man, I mean to each other. And they conquered each other and killed off each other in many, many wars. But those are not talked about because that's truth, and truth is inconvenient. No, we have to all gather together as people of color and stand against the Caucasian, because after all, they are the white devils. And that's what college is teaching our youth. That's not what Martin Luther King fought for. And when I say fought, I mean peacefully protested. That's not what the Bible teaches. But these people don't care about that. All they want to do is perpetuate the myth and the lie that every other race has been tormented by the white man, by the Caucasian, and has been victimized by the white man and the Caucasian. And it is a pile of horse shit that people want to believe so they can somehow justify their hatred of white people and Caucasians. And the reason being is that Caucasians represent many things to the world. They represent those who brought Christianity to the world and gave faith to the world. And yes, they represent the times of the Dark Ages and many bad things that happened in the world. But you show me one race that is perfect, you will find none. People today want to feel upset because their distant ancestors suffered. You know, I was not in agreement, and I'm still not in agreement with how this nation was formed. I think the American Indians were done very wrong, but I had no part in that. I also think that the hand of God was with the Caucasians that came here, the descendants of the children of Israel that came here and formed this nation. And you could say forced. But you see, people have this modern day view of things that the world has always been equal. Well, it has not always been equal. It's not equal now, and it will never be equal. You've got people that are unwilling to learn and remain ignorant to the truth. And they want to be treated the same as someone who's intellectually superior. And when I say intellectually superior, I don't mean that they're superior because of their race. I mean that they educated themselves to the truth. They read, they studied, they learned. That kind of superiority, which anyone can achieve. Any race and anyone can achieve it. But they have to be willing to do the work. They've got to be willing to study, to learn history, to learn biblical history, and to learn the reasons why things happened, and not be biased to it just because it may not favor their particular race. I'll tell you this, the people who call themselves by the name African American have never had a better time in their entire history than right now, despite how they yell racism at every turn. And of course, I'm not talking about everyone who is an African American. Again, I don't even like that term. I'm not talking about everyone who is black. There are many black people who have risen from the ghetto, from poverty, to become chiefs, to become CEOs, to become bosses, to become generals, to become whatever they wanted to and live the American dream. And why? Because they didn't play the victim card. And the same is true for Latinos. But they did it legally. But while we're on this subject, out of all the people in the world right now in America, who is leading the race for excellence? In other words, who's doing best out there in the world? It's not the Caucasians with so-called white privilege. It's not black people. It's not Latinos. You know who it is? It's the Asians and the Indians who came here from third world countries and appreciated the freedoms that America afforded them and got educated and worked hard and built their own businesses and became something instead of being spoiled little do-nothings and whining about the iniquities of life. They are the ones who have climbed the ladder the fastest. But no, there are always going to be those that say, oh, pity me, pity me, pity me. My ancestors, my great-great-great-great-grandparents have suffered. Well, how does that reflect on you? I mean, if we're going to be truthful, let's be truthful here. Slavery ended a long time ago. The conquest of America ended a long time ago. The conquest of America now is a bunch of socialists, a bunch of gays and lesbians, a bunch of atheists, a bunch of New Agers all gathering together on the left, trying to take this country and make it into a secular socialist nation. But what should one expect in a world where God is repugnant to his own children? And his own children have become perverts and so-called experts in everything, especially their own conceit. Yet they don't have brains enough to wipe their own behinds. And they love to tell everyone else what is right and wrong. And you know what happened? A trend developed whereby the intelligent people, not wanting to reach a confrontation with the morons and the insane and the ignorant to truth, stopped telling them that they were fools of the highest caliber and that they were wrong. And so then was born political correctness. And much like the proverbial leaven that Christ warned us about, it spread through our society, making rebels of the youth and kissing the asses of any cause that was anti-law, anti-justice, anti-fair, anti-right, and anti-common sense. You know, I think 70 years ago or more, specifically before World War II and during World War II, no one would have believed such things as go on in this nation now. But now the nightmare is all too real. And we're living in a world where approximately 30% of the people have any common sense. But only 3% will speak up and say anything for fear of being labeled as a bigot or a racist or a fascist or whatever. Isn't that ironic that a socialist is calling someone else a fascist? Or that racists are calling people racist? It's gotten to the point now to where these social justice warriors have taken over to such an extent that if someone does a crime, no matter how violent the crime is, that is of no regard. No, no, no. The importance now is placed on how the officers or how law enforcement obtained knowledge of it. The technicality and the loophole is paramount, not the quest for justice, so that criminals get away with murder. Can you not see the Kenite infestation in that whole idea? People get out now who have committed murder simply for little loopholes, like they may not have been read their Miranda rights, or someone did not follow the law properly. That has Kenite written all over it. In other words, the fact of the matter doesn't matter. The fact of the matter doesn't make any difference. Well, someone committed murder. Yes, he committed murder, Your Honor, but his confession was obtained illegally. Oh, well, then the case must be thrown out. Let the murderer go free. That's not what our Father's law says. That's not what the Word of God Almighty says. This same type of injustice was prevalent at the time of Jesus Christ. When he had healed the priests, the scribes and the Pharisees were not concerned with his miracles. Rather, they wanted him killed for healing on the Sabbath, which was no crime. But by their interpretation of the law, somehow it became a crime because they had an agenda. And what was their agenda? To kill the Son of God. Many people think they were just blind to what was going on. No, they knew who he was. They knew that he was Mashiach. They knew he was the Messiah that was promised. But they killed him anyway. Then we look to today at these moronic left-winger crybabies out protesting, out whining, and being called brave for doing so. They're not brave. They should not be celebrated, even for standing up for what they believe in, because what they believe in is a bunch of nonsensical insanity. And it should not be celebrated or encouraged. They put forth the idea that if you own a gun, you intend to use it somehow nefariously. No, morons. Most gun owners have no intentions of harming anyone, unless someone is trying to do them or their family or friends harm. They yell and hold these little rallies and call it a march for their lives. It's actually a march for their damnable lies. And they yell about teachers with guns, as if that's something bad. Teachers with guns? Oh my God! They attempt to twist reason and say, why should teachers have to pull double duty and worry about policing their schools? How can they teach and be security for the schools? Well, now let's think about that remarkable, colossal, brilliant argument, shall we? Let's use a few examples here that people should be able to easily understand. If people are not trained lifeguards, but they're out for, let's say, a day at the beach or a day at the lake, and they see someone drowning, should they jump into the water and try to save them? Or should they say, no, let's let the professionals handle this. Let's let the lifeguards handle this. What if there's not a lifeguard on duty? If people who are not firemen can pull other people from a burning car along the highway, should they stop and say, well, we could rescue these people before they burn to death, but let's let the professional fire handlers or firefighters handle it? Now, does that make sense to you? Well, if it doesn't make sense to you, then why does it make sense to libtards? That is a liberal retard, who say that it is not a teacher's job to pull double duty and have to police a school. First of all, the teacher's not pulling double duty in policing the school. The teacher is merely going to have a gun readily available so that if someone bursts into the classroom, they have a chance at blowing their damn heads off before they can kill more of their students or the teacher. Let's talk a little bit about double duty and protecting children, shall we? You know, a few years ago, on May 20th, 2013, a huge tornado struck Moore, Oklahoma. And the teachers of two particular schools got the kids to the safest places they could find in the schools. And when the tornadoes came and hit the schools and began ripping the schools apart, the teachers threw themselves on top of their students and were injured very badly. They had walls fall on them, and they were beaten and pelted by junk and pieces of metal as their schools were destroyed. Now, let's look at this from the liberal logic point of view. Should those teachers have adopted double duty and gotten those kids to safety? Or should they have hid in closets or jumped in their cars and left the schools and left the kids there, so that the kids had to look out for themselves, instead of pulling double duty? Do you see what an insanely ignorant and moronic argument that pulling double duty bullshit is? And yet, people are compelled to listen to liberals. See, this is what I've never understood about some of the stations who say that they want to be fair and balanced. Why do you give liberals the time to speak? That's like having an argument with a retarded person, or like having an argument with a schizophrenic. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't even have an argument. You can confront these liberals on the front lines at their protests, and half of them are like a deer in the headlights when the real issues are pointed out to them. They don't know what they're there for. They don't know what they're arguing for. They don't even know why they're mad, other than they've been told to be mad and bust in there to whine and protest. But you can't tell a retarded, self-righteous, socialist turd anything, because in their minds, they know everything. They are never wrong. And what is worse is they claim to be open-minded, yet their minds are as closed as minds can be. The only opinions that matter to them are their own. Instead of making people smarter in this country and in this world, the world covets making them less intelligent and dumbing them down, so that those who are too lazy to study and who do not think, that is to say, use their gray matter, are made to feel as though they are on equal footing to those who use their intelligence, common sense, and logic. They're equal as human beings, but they're not equal in intelligence. In other words, you don't walk into a company one day and say, I want to be the head of the company. You don't walk up and say to the White House and say, I want to be the president. You don't walk in one day and say, I want to be a scientist that works with nuclear physics, just because you want to. And you don't get a participation trophy prize. You get there by hard work and study. Has God not revealed to us the folly of the ignorant, the nonsense of the so-called liberal, and the blind stupidity of the socialist rebel, the blissful ignorance of the non-believer, and the vanity of the fleshly? It's easily seen by those of us who can see. Yet those who cannot see flock to the ignorance like a moth to the flame, like the vultures to the carcass, so to speak. For years now, these kinds of things were prevalent more on the left coast, in Hollywood. And Hollywood took those things which are perverse, which God himself has called perverse, and they changed them. They made them more palatable and acceptable. They gave us iconic figures. They gave us stars, actors, gay characters, lesbian characters, socialist characters, and they made them warm and loving and sweet characters that everyone loved, and they put them in comedy so that we could all laugh about it. There was no need for gay or lesbian characters. There was no need for socialist agenda. Except, of course, in the mind of the libtards, who wish to show how well they can kiss the asses of those who practice perversion and those who hate America. And over time, that is to say about the last 30 years, these characters have become commonplace and usual, so that no one thinks anything about it anymore. People no longer respect God and his word above the perversion and abomination because the movies and television shows have glorified them as being completely normal and completely natural, and just a part of the everyday puzzle that is this life. And of course, I need not say too much about social justice going into the movies. I mean, even the new Star Wars movies all suck because they are pushing a leftist idealism, which is being pushed by Disney. Disney itself, which is openly a basher of conservative Christian ideals, and this is the same Disney who brought in a bunch of foreigners from other countries and had Americans train them. And once Americans had trained them, they fired the Americans and put the foreigners in their place and paid them less. And Disney got sued for it. And while the lawsuit was won by those who had been fired, it was also stated in the judgment that Disney was allowed to hire and fire whoever they will. It's funny that doesn't apply to other things in this country. Try firing someone in this country now and not getting sued or not having to pay them. Try running a business, a big business, without unions. You see, this fight is not about diversity. It's not about equal rights. It's not about making things equitable. That is a fight that has long been won and long been over with. It is a myth that it is still alive. It is the same old rhetoric of pushing a racism that is not there. And despite their claims of equality, that is not their goal. Their goal is to be openly biased and in your face and to do what they want and to show you that they will do what they want and get away with it because they have support. Because I guarantee you, people are not going to stop going to Disney, just like people are not going to boycott these stores that are anti-Christian, anti-conservative, anti-American, because they don't want to be inconvenienced. You mean I shouldn't go to a Flying J truck stop and fill up my truck because they won't fly the American flag? Well, no, think nothing of it. Go ahead and give them your money. Show them you support them. And go ahead and pay these football players millions of dollars to take a knee in America playing for the National Football League or the American Football League. yet they won't stand for the flag. They won't stand for the red, white, and blue. It is ridiculous. Yet they're making millions of dollars. Well, they have the right to do that. Yeah, sadly, they do have the right to do that. The only problem is, should they? Should they do that? No, they shouldn't. And Americans have the right to show their displeasure with them by not going to the games, but are they going to not go to the games? Absolutely not. They're not going to stand up for America. They're going to pack those stadiums because they're not going to miss seeing sports. You know, this could all be dealt with in short order. If people were to hit them hard where it counts, in other words, the money, if the stadiums and the teams were to start losing their sponsors and to stop making money overnight, people quit going to the games, I would imagine you would see every player standing up for the flag right quick, whether they believed in it or not. And the same thing, of course, has happened in Great Britain. You know, they took one of my favorite TV shows, Doctor Who. I wasn't always in agreement with Doctor Who as far as its left-wing messages, but if you watch any kind of TV or movies now, you're going to be inundated with left-wing messages. However, it was a show that I grew up with. But after 53 years of the Doctor being a white male, they have replaced him now with a female. And it was not motivated by equality. I would not have been against a show about a female Time Lord, if you even know what Doctor Who is. I would not have been against a show with a strong female character. This is surely that the BBC can do it and will shove it in your face and make you like it. They will take a great character such as the Doctor and change him into a woman. Congratulations, BBC. Now we've got a transgender damn Doctor Who. It reminds me of the same thing that's going on in this country with the Boy Scouts, where they removed the word boy from the Scouts because it was offensive to girls who wanted to be in the Boy Scouts, who weren't content with being in the Girl Scouts. See, there's an agenda here, and it's not equality, it's just to piss people off. It wasn't enough that the Boy Scouts let gay scout leaders go in with little boys off into the woods. No, all of this came about because of dumbass, micro-minded simpletons who suffer a horrible jealousy complex and want to ruin a great institution so they can get off on its destruction. In short, they feel so inferior in themselves that they must destroy good things in order to raise their own feeling and status. And you know, speaking of TV and the movies, what do TV and movies offer us really? I mean, when I go see a movie or I watch a movie on television or watch a TV show, why do I watch it? Well, for the same reason you do. It's an escape. It's like reading a book. It's an escape into something. Because television offers us everything from superheroes to starship captains to vampires to immortals to whatever. All the things we cannot really be as human beings. But movies also show us what we can be as human beings. In other words, the fighting spirit of America is portrayed in movies. And maybe it's not exactly accurate. Maybe it's slightly propagandized, but who cares? It's wonderful to feel that patriotism coming from a movie. And especially when the movie is chock full of actual events and facts of what happened. And then, of course, we move to the internet. The internet, with emphasis on the word net. The internet with its useless memes and stupid questions that people post for apparently some kind of ranking. People will ask stupid questions like, look at this diagram. Which glass will fill up first? And of course, there's a bunch of glasses sat in a row with pipes connected to them. Or you'll see a blurred vision or a bunch of misspelled words that are spelled with numbers, and it'll say, only 10% of people can read this. If you can read it, pass it on. My answer to all of these questions and to all the stupid memes on the internet, for the most part, such as the ones like, which character do you identify with of the Avengers or with the Justice League or with Star Trek? Well, my answer is, who gives a crap? While the Avengers and the DC world and all these things are cute little things to be distractions for us and entertainment, I don't identify with any of them. And I don't identify with them because I know that they're stories and they're not real. I don't have superpowers, so I don't identify with them. And people will say, oh, but these questions are fun. They're fun. No, they're a waste of time is what they are. And then, of course, you've got the Christian aspect to all of this. You've got the Christian guilters, which will post a meme or post a picture of Jesus or some effigy of Jesus, which says, is Jesus welcome on your timeline? Or will you deny him? Because Christ said, whoever denies my name before men, the same will I deny before my Father and the angels of heaven. Only 2% will have the guts to repost this. Do you have the guts to stand for Jesus? I mean, really? You're trying to guilt people into reposting your post? Are you that desperate for popularity? I mean, this kind of thing was old like 10 years ago, but people still do it. Tell me, what use does Jesus have for a bunch of thumbs up and likes? God knows the hearts and minds of everyone. He does not need people on social media to give thumbs up and likes. How about the ones that say, let's post the American flag? Okay, fine. I'm all for posting the American flag. But, you know, after you post the American flag a number of times and you see your friends post it, then you get tired of reading, who is willing to post the American flag? Are you American and patriotic or un-American and unpatriotic? Again, most of us have already posted the flag. How much more patriotic are we because of posting these little feel-good, do-nothing gestures? Well, the answer is we're none. We're no more patriotic because of reposting flags. Because people will still not support Christ in reality or support the American flag in reality by standing up to the government and standing up to left-wing libtards. I mean, they'll talk amongst themselves about it, but they won't actually say or do anything. They won't write their congressmen or senators. They probably don't feel it will do any good anyway. But you know, Congress and senators are motivated by the public pulse. That's why they wear their little ignorant grins and kiss babies and try to look good in front of people. The ones who post this nonsense, especially about Christ, don't even understand the complexity of what that verse means. What verse? The verse that I quoted earlier about those who will deny my name before men will I deny before my Father and the angels of heaven. And they try to guilt you into reposting their post. Obviously, in their mind, that is some kind of a good work to them. However, maybe there's more to that verse than they are taking on an English-only understanding. Maybe it's not just for the atheist or people of other religions who deny Christ. I mean, how about we look at it from a different respect? What about when the Antichrist comes and people follow him over the true Christ and do not wait on their true husband? My friend, that is the epitome of denying Christ. And it is the epitome of biblical illiteracy and not knowing what the truth is. Another set of posts that really grab my ire, that stick me in the ass like a tack, are the ones that say that they will, usually this is done by some kind of an organization or some kind of a church. They say, we will donate money to help starving children in Africa or some third world country to keep them from dying if we can get 1 million likes and 10,000 forwards of this post. Really? So you're not going to help them anyway if someone doesn't like your social media post? If it doesn't get liked well enough, you're going to let the children starve to death? If it doesn't get forwarded enough, the children go hungry? Well, you're kind of a worthless pile of crap then, aren't you? You do not care as much as I do, though, brother, because I have reposted this. Yeah, okay, whatever you say. Now let's move on to the social media end of the world predictors. You know, this is sad to say. I have seen this amongst my fellow Shepherd's Chapel students, so-called. But somehow I don't think they were really paying attention to the teachings of Pastor Murray. Because Pastor Murray didn't speak anything about the little gray men, or about shape-shifting snake people, or about planet Nibiru, or about any of these subjects that people claim that Pastor Murray identified himself with, which he most certainly damn well did not. You know, today's Memorial Day, but several weeks ago, we were at the 14th of May of this year, and it was the 70th year. And several weeks hence, before May 14th of this year, 2018, people started posting things. And some of them were chapel students. Now, I'm not in the groups that they were posting in, but people liked their post, or people forwarded their post, or people commented on their post, or whatever, so I saw them. And I saw things like, well, May 14th is coming up. This is the 70th year of the generation of the fig tree. In other words, HMMMMMMMMMMM. What? Or another one said, May 14th is coming. The end of the generation of the fig tree is here. I guess we all know what that means. We'd better all get ready, wink, wink. I hate to tell you, bro, but some of us have been getting ready and been girding up since long before this date ever came around. And guess what? The date came and passed, just like I said it would in previous lectures. Just because it is the 70th year of the nation of Israel coming into being, and it is the generation of the fig tree, does not mean that it would happen on May 14th of the 70th year, as we learned. Just like all the people that predicted the rapture last year and the year before, and all these other things. First of all, there's not going to be a rapture. Second of all, if there was, You can't predict it. We have to watch out for the signs that we were told to watch for. And what are the signs that Christ told us are happening right now? Well, in Mark 13 and Matthew 24, Christ said, when you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars, know that these are the beginnings of sorrows. Well, guess what? There's still wars and rumors of wars. Now, we are getting close to the end of that time. Time is passing. But when they start putting more emphasis on peace, and peace is being pushed, then will the end come. But it will not come until it comes. You can't rush God. God is long-suffering. And it will not happen 1 second before God is ready, despite what you think, or despite what you work out with your formulas and your calculations. Let me change tone for a moment here. Earlier this year, a lady, which I knew fairly well, died. I knew her very well. She was a good friend. When I say fairly well, I mean, I worked for her and I thought she was a very nice woman. She baked cookies and she was very thoughtful. Nonetheless, she was from Brooklyn, and she was a very liberal-minded woman. And she was not familiar at all with our Father's Word. She had been raised, no doubt, Catholic, and had gotten away from it because she did not believe in what the Catholic Church preached. And she knew the history of the Catholic Church, of Spanish Inquisition and the Holy Wars and so on and so forth, and she did not agree with those things. She was kind of a hippie. Yet she was a very nice lady. Very good to me, and I thought very highly of her despite knowing that she was not on God's A honor roll. However, at her passing, I felt it just as keenly as anyone else's. And that's a lesson, perhaps, that we should all learn from, that all souls are important. I don't care what they may be doing in this flesh, whether they're a homosexual or a lesbian, or even whether they're a socialist moron in this flesh. All souls matter. Like I said, I knew this woman was not on God's highly favored list, but I do know that God still loves her. And God loves her soul. And her passing affected me. And I think it affected me because it put me in mind of what it's going to be like after the millennium when souls are cast into the lake of perdition. That is to say, hellfire, and burn up and are gone and will not be coming back ever. I mean, I know that most likely I will see this lady again in the millennium. But think about permanent loss, like atheists think. Atheists already think in these terms. In other words, to an atheist, when someone is gone. They're worm food. Which in itself, you can kind of understand the atheists in that regard because their minds are just not big enough to conceive of God and all that God is. They have to see proof. But these people, these socialists, these atheists, these New Agers, these ungodly, are teaching our kids today. And kids are being given everything they want. They're being spoiled. They're living their lives endlessly connected to devices, gaming, or being on the internet. And they have become as dependent upon their iPhones and their iPads and their Blackberries or whatever's still out there as any drug addict is to their particular chosen drug, which is to say poison. They cannot live without them. They will even have withdrawals, not necessarily to the body, but of rage when they're taken away from them. I mean, go on YouTube and type in videos of people texting You know, and watch the hilarity as the dummies walk into cars and trucks, or stumble into a pond or a pool, or step into oncoming traffic. You know, is it that important to you? Apparently so. The other day I was uptown at a local store and I saw a homeless man with one of these devices. He was wearing old clothes and a trench coat. He had on a filthy hat, he had a big long beard, and he had a grocery cart filled with things that he'd scrounged out of trash, and with meals that people had given him and other stuff, junk. But there he sat under a storefront, swiping up and down, left and right, on his little iPad. And I remember thinking at the time, you know, homeless people, that is to say the poor, did not used to have such technology. Now, it's none of my business how this guy obtained what he's got, but I do know that the man sits out by the side of the road and holds up a sign that says, "God bless you, give to the needy." And yet here he is with an iPad. Now, maybe someone gave him the iPad, but who's paying the bill for his internet? And why do people feel compelled to give this guy an iPad when he's able-bodied and could work? I mean, there's nothing wrong with the guy. He gets out and walks all around town. I see him all the time walking with his little basket. Maybe he just doesn't want to be part of the grind anymore. That I could understand. But even so, he should pull his own weight and not sit out and ask for a handout. But that's the world today, isn't it? Have it your way, whether you can afford it or not. Have what you want now. Don't wait. That is how many become enslaved to usury, i.e. their credit cards and the huge interest that they have to pay if they're late on a payment. And sometimes they get behind and never catch up. And that is why we're having an epidemic in this country of people who feel that the world owe them a living. And social justice warriors forward their cause. Many come here from other countries and will not learn our language. And we can't get jobs if we're not multilingual. But the companies and the stores pander to them. The other day I went into a Burger King, and there were advertisements for some theme park around here that were totally in Spanish with no English. They were on the doors and the windows of the Burger King, and they were at the register. And I got up there, and when I saw that, I walked out without buying a damn thing, and I went to McDonald's. Because it pissed me off so bad. I don't live in Mexico. I don't live in Colombia. I don't live in Guadalajara or Venezuela or any of these damn places. I live in the United States of America where we speak English. And anyone that comes here should learn the language and be forced to learn it if they stay. And I don't appreciate having my tax money taken to upkeep illegals and to pay for their 8 to 10 children, whether they're legitimate or illegitimate. But social justice morons say, but it's only fair that we should take care of their children. You know, I've got to pay taxes for stuff. I don't even have kids, but I have to pay taxes for schools so that they can brainwash our kids with a bunch of left-wing nonsense. You know, I don't think I can accurately reflect with the word morons what social justice warriors are. Because I would have to curse a lot more to reflect what bombastic buffoons and ignorant jilly-brained fools they are. The modern so-called liberal, which is nothing of the sort, is a socialist. A piece of crap with no brains nor common sense. What brains they do have, they use to thwart fairness and justice because they're blinded by hatred. Hatred for their own country, hatred for religion, specifically Christianity, and hate for anything that is just, right, and fair. And they would bathe themselves in gay and lesbian feces if they thought it would please them. And they would eat nails to please illegal immigrants if they thought that would please them. And they sell their own sins to others. And they sell their own souls for those sins. And they encourage others to sin. In social justice, there is no just reason for someone who commits murder, even mass murder, to be put to death. Why? Because they use Star Trek logic. They say, if we kill them as they have killed, then we are as bad as they are. And you know, this is a message that has been cleverly hidden in shows like Star Trek and many other shows, and hidden in comic books and cartoons, such as Justice League's, the DC Universe, and shows that are in prime time. You see, God's word says that a murderer should be put to death, and that is the law. So social justice takes it upon itself to say that God's law is barbaric, and that God's law should become null and void. And they replace it with men's knowledge and men's words, of men's way of looking at fairness, fleshly fairness. And they give us fictional characters with deeply pained souls like Batman, or hometown boys like Superman, farm boys, or people of all other backgrounds, Green Lantern, Spider-Man, whatever. Doesn't matter. DC or Marvel, doesn't matter. The message is pretty much the same. They use it to say that God's word is barbaric. Also Star Trek, like I said, Star Wars. If you take vengeance upon a murderer, then you are just as bad as the murderer. Bullshit! Read God's word. Well, we don't believe in God. We don't believe in any God. Well, then you're a moron. How has their system of justice worked out? Are things better than they were before? Is crime down? Are murders less? No, but then again, they have Planned Parenthood. Think about how many murders that one organization alone commits in unborn children being killed. Crime has skyrocketed. All the places where gun laws are enforced and people have their guns taken away from them and they buy back guns, that's where the gun violence is happening. But let's not obey God, who said to publicly execute people so that these things will cease to happen among you. No, 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 my goodness. That would be acknowledging that there is a God and that he knew what he was talking about when he made the laws for man to follow. And oh, we sure don't want that in this semi-secular socialist world. This is what modern social warriors have done to this nation. Now, you know what? I'm not going to keep going with this. I've been going now for a pretty good while, ranting and raving. I want to talk about one more thing right quick. I want you to just take notice. This is just a little home assignment for you. I want you to take notice of the hexagonal shapes that you see on television and on the internet and on billboard signs and on businesses or on advertisements, even at businesses. Take notice of how many times you see the hexagonal, which is the six-sided shape, on business logos, TV shows, in movies, anywhere you see it. just consciously take notice how often you see six-sided things. I mean, Walmart, at the end of every aisle, has got a six-pointed thing that says, think six. This is the age of sixes, friend. I don't think it's any marvel that we have a president named Trump. And I'm going to speak one more thing about that, and then I'll sign off. We have a golden boy in the White House. We had 8 years of socialist rule, and we had Obamacare, universal health care thrust upon us, and we had a bunch of unfair laws thrust upon us, and now we've got golden boy in the White House, Superman, Donald Trump. The answer, the true American hero, Donald Trump, who just happens to be a globalist. Now, I'm not going to come down on the man too hard. I mean, at least he's not Hillary Clinton. And I did vote for Trump so that Hillary Clinton would be kept out of office. But I knew that Trump was a globalist. And I know that he is part of the globalist agenda. Or he would be a dead president or a replaced president. Even though the liberals are trying to smear him, that's nothing. The whole left-right thing is nothing but a show being put on for your eyes. But even so, it stinks, and it has an odor that offends the nostrils and the sensibilities of the brain. But here we have Golden Boy. However, a long time ago, the man who wrote the Masonic so-called Bible said, in every generation, we will require and need a hero. After bad times, we will need good times. So we will give them a hero. Only that hero will be for us. He will work for us, and he will spread our message. I want you to remember that the Kenites are behind many of the most popular charities in this world. UNICEF, the Sierra Club, the Shriners, and other organizations. Why? Because the Kenites love to guise themselves and hide behind good. I mean, when Satan comes as the Antichrist, he's going to be hiding behind the ultimate good. He's going to claim to be Christ. So it's no marvel that his children do the same thing. And that they do good works. Yes, the Kenites do good works. They feed the hungry. They take care of children. They have cancer centers. Just bear that in mind. All is not what it appears, friend. Their agenda is still being pushed forward as they follow their star of Remphan, the sons of Cain. At any rate, that's where I'm going to end this particular commentary and rant. Probably some people will be offended, but you know what? If I've hurt your feelings, I don't care. Grow the hell up. I'm sorry if you're offended, okay? But if you're offended, then you need to straighten up, not me. If you're thrown off by my language, well, then you know what? There's plenty of other channels for you to listen to. I'm not an ass kisser. I'm not a sugarcoater. I speak things boldly and to the point. For the most part, I stick to teaching the Bible and don't talk about these things. But every now and again, I will dive into them, and when I dive in head first. And if that's offensive to you, well, go subscribe to someone that's going to drip some honey in your mouth and make you feel real good. Because I promise you, I'm not here to make you feel good. You should be feeling good already if you're listening to me and you know the truth. That someone has got the courage and the cojones to voice this. At any rate, that's where I'm going to end this rant. And I'm going to end this the way that I always do. It's my prayer for you, brothers and sisters, that you will open your eyes to the light of the truth. That is to say, through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, as given by our Father, God Almighty. His personage in the flesh, Yeshua HaMashiach. Stay in our Father's Word every day if you can. Study to show yourself approved. Use the tools God has afforded to us. The King James Bible, the Smith's Bible Dictionary, the J.P. Green's Interlinear, the E.W. Bullinger Companion Bible, the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, books like Biblical Numerics. Learn the manners of speech that the ancients used so that you can understand. Learn the metaphors. Learn how they conveyed a thought one to another. And first and foremost, pray to our Father for guidance and wisdom and understanding before and as you study His most holy word. Until we see you again, may God bless you, and thank you for listening. This has been Just Thoughts.